Acadiana, Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a cloudy Thursday. We had some showers still along the Gulf Coast, parts of St. Mary, Iberia, Vermilion. Still going to see a little bit of rain here over the next couple of hours, but I think that 30% you're seeing there in the left-hand side of your screen will quickly drop off. Also have Gabrielle and Humberto that is out in the Atlantic, and we've got 94L that we're also watching as well. And Gabrielle and Humberto's numbers are going to kind of switch back and forth there on the left-hand side of your screen. So there's your current conditions here in Lafayette. We have a lot of cloud cover, and it is still pretty humid out there, but dew points are going to start to drop off. Now that those winds have shifted to the west, they're eventually going to shift to the northwest. And I do believe we're going to see some better conditions as we go toward the weekend. Really pleasant conditions that I think you're really going to like, especially as we get into Saturday and Sunday with a lot of sunshine and some comfortable temperatures. Quick look at our traffic cams. Again, some gray skies out there, but right now, at least here in Lafayette and most of the I-10 corridor, the roadways are dry, but you see we're starting to get some sunshine now up toward Alexandria. So that's an indication of some of that drier air coming in. Kind of a gray day. I've been telling you, we always see such beautiful conditions on Panama City Beach, but you can see there's some rain out there this time around along with that front. Gray skies over toward Orange Beach. Looks like the beaches are pretty much empty here on a Thursday. And over toward Dauphin Island, we still have some rain and some showers in the area, but you can see maybe a little peak of sunshine right now, so not too bad of a day there. Over toward Lumcon and Cocodrie, as we work our way westward, a lot of gray skies. And off to the left, which is south, you are seeing quite a bit of thunderstorm activity out in the offshore waters, but a little farther toward the west. Looks like someone's turning it into a decent fishing day there over southeastern Texas around Bayou Vista and over to around Galveston Bay. Starting to get the dry air to come in, so they are beginning to see a little more sunshine there over southeastern portions of Texas. And for those of you who are itching to get out there in your boat, the winds are going to be kind of out of the northwest today, about 15 to 20 knots, seas about 2 to 3 feet, so a little rougher out there. Vermilion Bay eastward, you're still going to be dealing with some showers and thunderstorms, but if you're off the Cameron Parish coast or in some of our inland lakes and bays, I think you'll be in pretty good shape. There is a look at our local radar. And we've got some decent rains that are still coming down here over southeastern parts of Vermilion Parish. And it looks like that's going to scoot its way over toward New Iberia, Lydia, Jeanerette, and down into portions of St. Mary Parish as well. So if you live over toward Patterson, Morgan City, and Berwick, you will probably continue to see some rain here through the early part of the afternoon. But the rest of the area is drying out nicely. Let's grab some of the other radars farther inland. And again, we got some ground clutter there. That's not rain that we're looking at. So we're in pretty good shape, I think. And we are going to see improving conditions here over the next couple of days. And there's a look at the satellite. You can see a little bit of wraparound moisture there over North Louisiana, but some peaks of sunshine starting to come in there for the middle part of the state. So let's get into the tropics stuff. And our frontal boundary right in here is still producing some decent showers and thunderstorms. Now, occasionally as we get toward the latter part of the hurricane season, September and October, we got to start watching some of these fronts because occasionally they'll stall out in the Gulf waters, and you can sometimes get a bit of a low pressure area to develop along those fronts, and those can turn into tropical systems. But we're not really seeing a whole lot of that as we've got pretty much some serious wind shear now in the mid and upper levels over the Gulf waters, so probably not going to see anything develop there. Pretty day over Central America with the exception of Panama and Costa Rica, where we've got a little bit of a monsoonal trough coming off the South American continent, and that is bringing some showers and thunderstorms there over toward the western part of the Caribbean. Then we've got 94L, which is right there. We've got Tropical Storm Humberto, which is right there. So the Caribbean and the far western Atlantic is where things are going to be really busy here over the next couple of days. And then finally, we've got Gabrielle that's way up here. That's going to be pushing through the Azores. It is still a hurricane and will probably stay at least hurricane strength once it goes through the Azores Islands. But at this point, it might be losing some of its tropical characteristics. Now, those low pressure areas over the northern Atlantic can stay pretty strong. Those gales can really get going with the gusty winds. So occasionally, even though it doesn't have the tropical characteristics, it can still pack a powerful punch. And we're going to see that possibly happening through the Azores and over toward Spain and Portugal. But we got 94L, Humberto, Gabrielle, and one tropical wave that's out over the central Atlantic, way far to the south. So it probably will not be doing a whole lot out there. So the tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center outside of Gabrielle and Humberto, 94L is looking a lot more interesting, but it is interacting with the Dominican Republic. So as it interacts with land and some mountainous terrain, and because it's in its formation stage, seen several little surface circulations try to get going. And you may have noticed that with Gabrielle when it was just getting started. It had a low-level circulation, and then a new low-level circulation kind of formed maybe 4 or 5 degrees north. So you saw a big jump in the changes of position with Gabrielle in its early stages. And we may be seeing this with 94L2. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. But there is a little bit of a concern because those water temperatures are so extremely warm there over the Bahamas and the northern part of the Caribbean. In fact, it's some of the warmest water that we have in the Atlantic Basin right now, and those numbers are above the average. Now, there is some forecast that's trying to take this up toward the east coast of the U.S., but you do see this little eddy of some cooler than average waters. In fact, some of those waters are below 80 degrees right there along the coast, which may inhibit some of the development as it is forecast to move up toward the north. And of course, you've got the tropical cyclone heat potential. You got a lot of heat content here over the northern islands and in where the track of 94L could go. So that's another reason why we're a little more concerned with the east coast of the U.S. But also look at this. There's not a whole lot of wind shear here along the east coast or the northern part of the Caribbean. So the conditions might be somewhat favorable here over the next couple of days. So let's get started with everything. We're going to go ahead and start with Gabrielle because it's kind of one of the most unusual systems that we've seen in quite some time. It is still classified as a hurricane, although you're starting to see the center of circulation kind of emerge, and then you've got all the thunderstorm activity kind of offset to the east. So that's an indication that it's battling some wind shear, but it is still a tropical system, full-fledged tropical system, and it's forecast to stay a hurricane as it moves through the islands of the Azores. And there are hurricane warnings that are up. But you see here where you see the letter and the circle, it turns white there. That's an indication that it's going to be transitioning to a non-tropical low. So it'll be subtropical for a while and then a cold core system by the time it reaches Europe. But it could still have wind speeds up above 40 miles per hour. So it could still have at least tropical storm strength, even though it would not be a tropical system. But you can see that the forecast models do have a downward turn over the next 5 days, and most models kind of drop it down to a tropical depression by the time we get into the early part of next week. So let's move on to Humberto. Humberto is our newest contestant in the 2025 hurricane season, and it's starting to take a little bit better shape here compared to yesterday. Big blow up of convection right around the center. There's some wind shear up here, kind of blowing some of the tops of the thunderstorms off, but as it starts to move off toward the west, it may not be affected by that wind shear quite as much. So the forecast with Humberto is for some steady strengthening, not a very fast moving system. You can see that even by Saturday and into Sunday, it won't even move until maybe north of Puerto Rico here. So that's a pretty slow moving system. And then it has that turn moving toward the north, and then we think a trough is going to pick it up and pull it back out that way. Now, Bermuda is right there. It is outside of the cone, but those folks are probably going to be a little bit nervous about that one because it's a little too close for comfort, number one. And number two, it's drifting off toward the west. And we all know that the stronger side of the hurricane is always on the eastern side. So things could be a little bit rougher for our friends over in Bermuda. But because of the wake it's going to create, we're going to see some rough seas, some rip currents, and some beach erosion all the way east or westward over toward the east coast of the U.S. Now, fortunately, the majority of our computer models do take this off toward the west. and eventually turn it back off toward the north. So at this point, it does not look like it's going to be affecting the U.S. directly, indirectly more, and then it's going to shoot its way back out into the Atlantic. Perhaps the Azores might have to watch out for yet another tropical system coming in their direction. But the models are pretty steady here going into day 3 and day 4, where this becomes a hurricane. Several of them have some rapid intensification here, getting it up to a Category 3 or a major hurricane. And that does include the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. But again, that is going to be mainly a fish storm, but I would say that Bermuda really needs to keep a close eye on it. So let's work on 94L now. This is the one that could possibly threaten the U.S. Now remember, we only had Tropical Storm Chantal that made landfall on the Carolina coast this year. So far, we've only had one tropical system hit the continental U.S., which is really unusual. I was going back and doing some of the research, and since 1950, I think there's only 2 seasons where we only had one, and that would be the low number. We've never gone a hurricane season since 1950 without at least one tropical storm or hurricane making landfall on the continental U.S. Now, that's the continental U.S., not counting Puerto Rico, which is out here. Which often does get tropical systems come their way. But as far as the continental U.S., we've only had one. So what we're looking at here is you've got a lot of convection here over Puerto Rico and over the Dominican Republic. But it's really hard to figure out where the low pressure center is. It might be kind of up in this area. It might be down here. And there's going to be a couple of days before it's going to figure out what is going to be that main circulation that's going to be coming around. But the forecast drags this very, very slowly over toward the Bahamas and might even stall for a little bit over the Bahamas. So that means for Haiti and the Dominican Republic, which is mountainous terrain, there's going to be quite a bit of heavy rain and perhaps some flooding that will be going on. So that might be something you'll be seeing in the news here over the next couple of days. And then our friends over the southeastern Bahamas are really going to have to be watching this closely. At this point, it doesn't look like it's going to be anything super strong initially, but it will be dumping some heavy rain and causing some rough seas over parts of the northern Caribbean as well as the southeastern Bahamas. Now, here's what's interesting is yesterday's forecast tracks, and again, I'm just taking the various hurricane models. We're not looking at any of the ensembles on any specific model, but you can see there's pretty general agreement of a very slow northwesterly drift, but then even with that trough that's coming off the East Coast, this one may not be strong enough to get picked up by that trough. Remember, a stronger system builds up higher in the atmosphere, and the higher those bigger storms and the whole system gets in the atmosphere, those mid and upper level winds can start to pick it up. But if it's just kind of forming here at the surface, those upper level winds would blow right over it. It wouldn't be even touching where it could give it that shove because it would be too low in the atmosphere, because these upper level winds are what tries to steer things around. So the weaker the system is, the harder of a time it'll have to get picked up and pushed off toward the northeast. So our newest models here are kind of dragging this over toward maybe the Georgia-Carolina coastline as a tropical storm. And as you can see here on the intensity models, the majority of them keep it a tropical storm. You got a couple up here that go to hurricane, but when you want to work on your forecast confidence, you want to kind of take the consensus here. So this might be a weaker system, and that might be the reason why some of the models have kind of shifted a little bit and are kind of putting the east coast of the U.S. in their crosshairs rather than curving it around like what we're going to see with tropical storm, or what will eventually become Hurricane Humberto. So let's kind of quickly go through some of the models here and just kind of get an idea. Now, this is the Euro model from earlier, and the reason why I use the earlier one is because I can go out a little bit farther into the future, because the runs that go every other, the 6Z and the 18Z, only goes out 144 hours, while the 0Z and the 12Z model goes out way farther, goes out 15 days. But you see, we've got two tropical systems. You see Humberto strengthening. and you see what could possibly come the next tropical depression, or maybe even Imelda, going up there toward the Carolina coastline. And then it rolls inland, and then you see the stronger of the two systems getting pulled back out to sea. Because remember, we talk about that trough. You see all this right here that would push it. But because Humberto looks to be stronger, it's going to build higher in the atmosphere, and those winds will be able to catch it and turn it back off toward the north. At the same time, what might be Imelda down here, first of all, won't be getting caught up in this, but it will also be a weaker system, so those winds would overshoot it a little bit and maybe not see anything coming in. Best case scenario, though, is for us as we go all the way out beyond 10 days. The Gulf waters, again, are staying very quiet. That is exactly what we want to see this time of the year. Let's roll it back here, and let's grab the GFS and just see what we've got going on. Again, you've got two areas of moisture. That would be 94L. This would be Humberto right here, so that way you can watch both of those. And as we just advance it, the GFS has a strengthening system over the Bahamas, and again, very similar to what the CIRA was showing, perhaps sometime early next week. This is actually midday Monday of next week. According to the GFS, the Carolinas could be dealing with a tropical storm, while Humberto will continue to strengthen out in the Atlantic and then kind of get pulled in those upper level westerlies and shot back out to sea. So that's the scenario that we've got for the GFS. And if we just go ahead and pull this all the way out to 240 hours, look at that. There might be another cold front coming in about 10 days from now. That would be good news. But you can see that there's nothing developing over the Gulf waters, which is great news for us here in South Louisiana. So let's go ahead and roll it back once again. Let's grab the Canadian model. Now remember, these are the models that only give you one solution. We'll look at some of the ensembles with the Google AI in just a minute, but here we are to today. And again, you got the moisture associated with 94L, and you got Humberto right there. So we'll watch the both of those as we just kind of advance things. The Canadian model has some very, very slow development, maybe a little bit stronger than what the GFS, but this is interesting. You see that little dance that the two lows did? That's what's called the Fujiwara effect. And what happens is they'll rotate around each other, and then eventually one will win out and absorb the other. So the Canadian model is actually showing more of a Fujiwara dance. And if you want to know more about the Fujiwara effect, I do have a link below in the description if you want to check that out. This has happened a few times last year, and that's kind of why that link is down in the description below. But this would be pretty interesting to see that little Fujiwara dance, and then the whole thing gets shot back out once the westerlies really start to kick in here off the continental U.S., and that would shove everything out of the way. Now, one little tidbit that I wanted to show on here is there's a little bit of a low pressure area that looks like it wants to try to get going here over the western part of the Bay of Campeche. But as we advance this all the way to the end of the loop, you can see that there's really nothing developing out of that. It just kind of falls apart. But you'll also notice there's a lot more moisture developing here over the western part of the Caribbean, according to the Canadian model, and this would be about a week from Sunday. So let's finish off with the icon, at least with the deterministic models, and unfortunately we have to go more with wind rather than water on this one. So there's where we got 94L, and there is Humberto there. And as we just go ahead and fast forward these off toward the northeast, or rather northwest, you see some slower development, maybe a little bit more of a westerly track compared to the other two models when it comes to the icon, keeping it steady there around the Bahamas, and then kind of following along with both of them and shooting them back out. And this would be about a week out from today. So this would be next Friday. And it looks like it brings what might be Imelda to be a hurricane as well. So we might end up having two hurricanes. I'm really thinking we're going to probably have one tropical storm and one hurricane out of this, one major hurricane, in fact. All right, so now let's look at all the ensemble models. And I know this is a very confusing map. It just basically looks like we took a wad of spaghetti and threw it against the wall to see what sticks. But a couple of things that we're watching here. So down here is 94L, and over here is Humberto. So you can see pretty much with Humberto, or rather with Humberto, all the lines are pretty much in agreement, and your cone, which would be about like that probably, is very similar to what we're seeing with the National Hurricane Center's forecast, which takes it away from the U.S. East Coast. So that's why we're going to focus our attention a little bit more here on 94L, which could possibly become, let me make sure I got this centered right so that everybody can see it here. Okay, so I've got all the legends and I've got all the models turned on this particular one. So as we advance it forward here, we'll just go ahead and hit play. You can see that 94L is calling for a low pressure area. Couple of different models calling for a low pressure area, and then tropical storm. And again, the spaghetti plots that you're seeing there with the different model runs has something getting close to the Carolina coast, but then again, AI kind of goes ballistic later on in the thing. So we're just going to focus on just the next few days. And you see that Humberto and all of the ensemble models. Now remember, those different dots and those different lines, it's the same models that are run over and over and over again, but there's just a little tweak in each one of them because we know as meteorologists that there's going to be changes in the forecast. The atmosphere is going to do different things versus what the deterministic model is telling us today, because we all know those change. So basically all the extra lines that you're seeing here are the what ifs. And what's cool about this is now you're talking about a variation of where you could see some kind of a land strike that really could be anywhere from the east coast of Florida all the way up to the Carolinas, and you could still even get a turn away like that. So there are several models that are doing that too. So right now, I think 94L will likely get a name here in the next couple of days, and I think the east coast of the U.S. might need to prepare for a strong tropical storm. Hurricane doesn't look to be in the cards right now, but again, that could all change over the next couple of days. Now remember, all of these tropical storms and hurricanes here in the last couple of weeks have really come from the usual suspect areas of the Atlantic, but we're about ready to finish off the month of September and head into October. So rather than a lot of these big tropical waves coming off the East Coast and then curving their way around like that, we now start to see a little bit more development over the western part of the Caribbean and the western Atlantic. Sometimes these come from fronts where you get low pressure to develop along a front, and then it will slide its way off toward the northeast like that. But we get a little more concerned during the month of October for anything that would develop there over the western Caribbean or particularly over toward the Bay of Campeche, because as you know, those are a little bit too close for comfort whenever things develop there. And then based on some of the tropical cyclone heat potential that we have with that heat content, those very warm temperatures, if you get just the right atmospheric conditions, you can go from 0 to 100 in nothing flat. And what a perfect example would have been Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita back in 2005. Another rapidly intensifying hurricane was Hurricane Milton that did something a little bit different. It developed over here and went off this way, but that was late October, early November, and most tropical systems pull off toward the northeast pretty quickly during the latter part of the hurricane season. So we still got, I think, 9 weeks, 3 days to go before hurricane season officially ends. But boy, if we can get through the next 5 or 6, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape here along the Gulf Coast. So let's hope the next 5 to 6 weeks are nice and quiet. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also turn on those notifications. And remember, you can hear my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. I'll be over at WBRZ tomorrow for Tune In from 5 to 9 and their noon show, which unfortunately means that Let's Talk Tropics on Friday is going to be pre-recorded, but it will still be dropped on my YouTube channel at noon. So it'll be pre-recorded just a little bit before that. That way I can handle the noon show there over at Channel 2. Also, please follow my social media pages, both on Facebook and X. And of course, thanks to everyone who subscribed to Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Can't wait to kick off the weekend with some beautiful weather on Friday. I'll see you then.